Today we will be looking at one of the most exciting questions in human history. Did Jesus really exist, and if so, when did he live? We will arrange historical sources and their statements on a timeline and then see what conclusions we can draw. I'm Peter and this is Histomania, History on a Timeline. You have surely heard some of Jesus' life from the Bible. There was his birth in Bethlehem. When he grew up, he is said to have been a carpenter, and later he gathered followers, his disciples, around him, who then accompanied him until his death on the cross. And finally there is the Easter story with his resurrection. Today we want to focus on Jesus as a historical person. What sources prove his life and what do they say? First of all, we have to keep in mind our chronology. We write the year 2023 AD, and intuitively we could say that Jesus was born in the year 0. But in our Christian calendar, there is no year 0. There is the year 1 before Christ, and the following year is the year 1 after Christ. So in our time calculation we assume that Jesus was born in the year 1, that is 2022 years ago. We always celebrate Christmas, the feast of his birth, on December 25th, so everything seems clear. Jesus was born in Bethlehem on December 25th in the year 1 AD. Not quite. December 25th was established as a holiday much later. Early Christians did not celebrate Jesus' birthday at all. For them, the focus was on Easter as a celebration of the resurrection. It wasn't until the 4th century that Christians began celebrating Jesus' birth on December 25th. There are some stories about the 25th of December being of pagan origin and that the holiday was taken over from a Roman god. But this is not provable, so is probably not true. Where the 25th of December comes from is simply not known according to the current state of research. Let's see if at least the year is correct, or if we can find out more. For this we take a look at the other players who lived around the time of Jesus. There we have Emperor Augustus, who won the power struggles after the death of Julius Caesar. He was emperor of the Roman Empire from 31 BC to 14 AD. He was then followed by his stepson Tiberius, who was emperor from 14 to 37 AD. And we also look at the two that followed, which were Caligula from 37 to 41 and Claudius from 41 until his death in 54. Then Herod plays a role. He was a client king, who was appointed for large parts of today's Israel. And Publius Sulpicius Quirinius, who was governor for Syria around the year 67 AD. Judea also belonged to the province of Syria at that time. And also Pontius Pilate, of whom we do not know his lifetime, was governor for the province of Judea from 26 to 36 AD under the Emperor Tiberius. In the case of Pontius Pilate, the sources are so poor that at times it was even assumed that he was not a historical person. In 1961, however, a stone with his inscription was found, and since then his existence has been considered certain. Unfortunately, we do not have a birth certificate of Jesus, and we do not know of any diary that he would have written. And, astonishingly, no writings about him exist that would have been written during his lifetime. Nevertheless, there are various sources that make statements about him after his life. And here we distinguish first of all according to the kind of the sources: are they Roman, Jewish or Christian? The most authentic sources are probably those that do not come from Christianity. Therefore, we will first look at the Roman sources here. In the early 2nd century AD, we have three candidates for this: Pliny the Younger, Tacitus, and Suetonius. Pliny the Younger wrote a letter to Emperor Trajan in 111 AD, mentioning Christians who worshipped Christ. Tacitus wrote about 116 AD about the Great Fire in Rome in 64 AD and blamed the Christians. He also mentioned that Christ was executed under the tenure of Pontius Pilate, and that was in Judea from 26 to 36. And Suetonius, a Roman writer, wrote in his Emperor's Vitae that Claudius expelled the Jews, who were constantly stirring up trouble at the instigation of Christ. If you have been paying attention, you will have noticed that all three Roman sources speak of Christ and not of Jesus. Christ is already the title that the early Christians gave to Jesus, which means something like the Anointed One. In all three sources, Christians do not do well, so we can assume that these sources were not falsified by Christians who wanted to glorify him. So for the historical Jesus, we learn here that a Christ is said to have lived and was executed under Pontius Pilate. Let's move on to another non-Christian source, a Jewish one. Flavius Josephus, who was born in 37-38 AD, shortly after Jesus' death, was a Jewish Hellenistic historian. He wrote 2 passages about Jesus in his work, Jewish Antiquities. The first passage, it is also called Testimonium Flavianum, that is the testimony of Flavius, describes Jesus as a historical figure who was executed under Pontius Pilate and who had followers. Unlike the Roman texts, however, Jesus is portrayed here in a positive light, making this work somewhat controversial among historians. It is believed to have been revised by Christians, but at its core it is still considered authentic. In another passage, Josephus reports the execution of James, who is described as the brother of Jesus who is called Christ. Thus we learn not only that Jesus bore this epithet, but also that he had a brother. Finally, we have the Christian sources. Here we have the problem that authentic memories of Jesus are mixed with contents of faith. Paul's letters are the oldest Christian sources, written between 48 and 61 AD. Paul wrote these letters to churches he had founded and to individual members of those churches. There are a total of 13 of these writings, at least 7 of which are considered authentic, but they are rather useless for a biography of Jesus. The Gospels, the Good News, were written in the second part of the 1st century AD, and 4 of them then found their place in the New Testament. Because of references to the Jerusalem temple, the Gospels are dated to after 70. This is the year the Romans destroyed the Second Temple in Jerusalem, parts of which still stand today in the Western Wall. If you are more deeply interested in the history of Israel, I link to an interactive timeline on it in the description. Soon I will also do a video on this, so activate the bell now so you don't miss a video. I would also appreciate a like on this occasion if you like the video. Matthew and Luke state that Jesus was born during the lifetime of King Herod, but according to Josephus he died in 4 BC. Thus, Jesus was probably born in 4 BC or earlier. Most researchers today believe that Jesus was born between 7 and 4 BC. Luke dates Jesus' birth to a Roman census in Judea under Publius Sulpicius Quirinius, ordered by Emperor Augustus. However, Quirinius did not become governor of Rome for Syria and Judea until 6/7 AD. Luke's account is therefore usually interpreted as a chronological error and an attempt to make Jesus' parents' journey to Bethlehem believable. In fact, researchers assume that Jesus was probably not born in Bethlehem, but in his hometown of Nazareth, an insignificant village of about 400 inhabitants. In the Gospel of Luke, however, we find the only concrete indication of a year in the New Testament. It is about John the Baptist, who appeared in the 15th year of the reign of Emperor Tiberius. This 15th year of the reign of Tiberius was in the year 2627, or 2930 depending on whether one takes his years of reign from the time of his co-rule with Augustus from autumn 12, or from the time of his sole rule from August 14. At that time Jesus should have been about 30 years old according to Luke, and since this time Jesus appeared then publicly. This was not so long before his death. We calculate here briefly back. 2930 fits quite well with our year 1, 2627 would fit quite well with our year 4 before Christ. According to all the Gospels and Tacitus, Jesus was executed by order of Pontius Pilate, the Roman prefect. The day of his death is described as the day before the Sabbath, that is, a Friday during the Passover festival. However, there is some debate as to whether the day of his death occurred after the Seder evening or the preparation day. The Gospels of Mark, Matthew, and Luke suggest that it was the 14th of Nisan, while the Gospel of John gives the 15th of Nisan as the date of death. To determine the possible years of Jesus' death, we turn to astronomers who can tell us when the 14th and 15th of Nisan fell on a Friday. The 14th of Nisan fell on a Friday in the years 30 and 33, while the 15th of Nisan fell on a Friday in the years 31 and 34. Most researchers consider the year 30 to be the most likely year of Jesus' death because Paul became a Christian between 32 and 35, after persecuting the early Christians for a while. How else can we approach years and dates about the historical Jesus? In addition to written sources, there are also archaeological findings that could point to the existence of Jesus. For example, graves from the time of Jesus have been discovered in Jerusalem that may be associated with him or his followers. The Gospel of Matthew mentions the Star of Bethlehem that led the 3 wise men from the east to the baby Jesus. So we could also take a look at what was happening in the sky at that time. Astronomers can calculate the course of heavenly bodies quite reliably back. I don't want to go into details more exactly. Here only a few possibilities are mentioned. Halley's Comet was visible between October 12 BC and February 11 BC. The Great Conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn, thus the apparent meeting of the 2 planets in the sky, took place 7 BC. Then we have a complex constellation of Sun, Jupiter, Venus and Moon 6 BC. And 2 different conjunctions of Venus and Jupiter in 3 to 2 BC. Such observations are not considered scientific, but I still didn't want to withhold them from you. But I have one more. Geoscientists have also looked beneath the earth. In the Gospel of Matthew it is said that at the death of Jesus the earth shook. Researchers have examined sedimentary layers near Jerusalem and found evidence of 2 major earthquakes. One in 31 BC and one between the years 26 and 36 AD. Then they cross-referenced the seismic and astronomical data with the Jewish calendar and New Testament texts, and came up with the date of death, Friday, April 3, 33. Lastly, it should be mentioned that there were some Jewish authors at the time of Jesus, such as Philon of Alexandria and Justus of Tiberias, who gave detailed accounts of the circumstances of the time. However, Jesus is not mentioned in their writings with any word. Also the main work of the just mentioned Flavius Josephus, Bellum Judaicum, from the 1st century, which deals with the Jewish revolt, does not mention Jesus at all. In summary, there is very thin evidence for the existence of Jesus as a historical person, but there are enough doubts and alternative theories. Moreover, an existence would also not prove that he performed miracles, or rose from the dead. But hey, let's not get upset by this. Next time there will be a timeline again in a topic where the knowledge is more secure than in our case today. So stay tuned friends until next time when it's Histomania time again.